Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Persuasive, the series where I teach you all the techniques from behavioral science in order to get more people to say yes to you. In today's episode, we're doing a big one. We're going to be covering all 6 principles from Robert Cialdini's Influence. It's one of the most popular books in all of persuasion science and one of the most popular books in behavioral science in general. Let's talk about what Cialdini's 6 principles are, starting with the first one, reciprocity. The way that we use this when trying to be persuasive is that we give a little bit away to the person we're trying to persuade first in order for them to have this very strong psychological urge to want to give back to us. But the magical thing about reciprocity that Cialdini makes very clear in his book is that the request that you ask for in return can be much larger than the thing you gave away. Think about free samples when you're at a food market. Why do they give them away? Well, by giving away a free sample, it creates this psychological urge to be reciprocal. In other words, when the person takes your free sample, they then have this very strong desire to want to give back to you. And the way that they will often give back to you is by buying a full piece of your product. But often that full piece is a lot bigger than the free sample you gave away. This also applies to things like software services that we use online. By giving away free trials and free demos, then this also creates this sense of reciprocity as people then feel a strong desire to want to give back to you. So that's Cialdini's first principle of persuasion. Let's move on to the second one, which is commitment and consistency. Okay, so the idea behind commitment and consistency is that we're more likely to say yes to a request if we believe it to be consistent with our previous actions or consistent with our new identity. The way that you'd use this in persuasion is to get people to commit to something which is very easy to accept, and then follow it up with a bigger request that is consistent with that previous request. Let me give you an example. So when I was traveling in Berlin with a friend, we were approached by these people from the street who I'm pretty sure are scammers, but they came to us with a clipboard and requested that we sign their petition to support disabled people. Now, of course, we said yes. Like, why would we not sign a petition to support disabled people? However, what they were really doing was just trying to get us to commit to a small request and then follow it up with a big one. And the big one was, are you willing to donate money to our cause that supports disabled people? So because we had first said yes to this very easy request of signing the petition, we then felt this really strong psychological urge to want to say yes to their next request of donating money. After all, that would be being consistent with our previous actions. We support disabled people, so why would we not pledge money towards it? Now, I didn't end up giving them any money because I was pretty sure that this wasn't a real charity and instead these people were just scammers trying to steal money from tourists. However, one of the things that I remember really strongly from that moment was how strong my urge was to want to say yes to them because I'd said yes to this previous request. And so you can do the same when you're trying to be persuasive too. Sometimes we call this the foot in the door technique. The idea is to basically get people to say yes to something very benign, something very easy for them to say yes to, and then follow it up with a bigger request that is consistent with that first one. Okay, so the third principle of persuasion is called social proof, and this is an absolute classic in behavioral science at this point. Social proof is the idea that people are more likely to do something if they know that a lot of other people are doing it too. Cialdini's classic example from the book is regarding washing your towel when you go to a hotel room. The example is that when you go to a hotel, there might be a little sign in the bathroom that says, please reuse your towel. Some people will give you a reason as to why you should do this, like, please reuse your towel, it helps save the environment or helps reduce our water usage. However, according to Cialdini's work, an even more persuasive message is to use this idea of social proof. So rather than just say, please can you reuse your towel, you might say 90% of people who stay in the same room as you reuse their towel. By saying that other people who do the same thing as you are reusing their towel, that gives the behavior of reusing your towel social proof. It makes it seem like that if you don't reuse your towel, you're the one that's being weird. And what Cialdini found in his research was that people were far more likely to reuse their towel when given the social proofing message. We also see examples of this all the time. The world is full of social information, especially in the era of the internet. There are these ads from the NHS, for example, during the pandemic that tried to get people to take the vaccine, and the ad said, join the millions of people who've already got the vaccine. By saying that millions of people have already got something, this creates social proof, the idea that a lot of people are doing it, so it's probably fine. And as a result of that, more people were persuaded to take the vaccine. You also see elements of social proof on websites like Amazon. When you see a particular product has thousands of reviews compared to a very similar product with maybe only 10 or 12 reviews, you're more likely to trust the one with thousands of reviews because you know that thousands of people have tried it and they seem to be fine with it. It has that social proof, and so you're more likely to trust it. Okay, let's move on to number 4. Number 4 is all about authority. Now, the idea behind authority is quite simple. It's that we are more likely to listen to a message that comes from somebody in a position of authority. So when you're trying to be persuasive, always try and raise your authority if you can. And there are different ways that you can do this. One of Cialdini's favorite examples comes from a call center where he got people to introduce their co-workers by saying how many years experience they had dealing with the thing that they were working on. For example, I'm going to pass you over to Miriam. She has over 7 years working in customer sales. By stating how much experience somebody has, you raise their authority and and therefore make them far more persuasive. But there are other cues to authority as well. The clothes that you wear, for example, can be massively influential in showing how much authority you have. For example, on a very famous study on jaywalking, people were far more likely to follow somebody else who jaywalked if that person was wearing something smart like a business suit as opposed to something more casual. What that tells us is that people were looking at the business suit as a cue for the authority, and therefore seeing that if they did it, then it probably is fine for them to do it too. So the takeaway for you when you're trying to be persuasive is to always raise your authority however you can. For example, when I give presentations, I always start by establishing my credentials. A lot of people skip over this, they don't think it's very important, but actually it's massively important as it completely changes the way that your entire message is framed. So my top advice to you is before making a request or before giving a presentation, always take the time to establish your authority, talk about your experience, talk about why people should care about your opinion, and then give your opinion because it makes so much difference. Okay, so let's move on to number 5, which is liking. The idea behind liking is that people are more likely to say yes to a request if it's from somebody who they like. So how do you get someone to like you? Well, there's lots of different ways that you can do this, but one of the main ways that Cialdini talks about in his book is all about establishing common ground with people. The way that I use this in my personal life is I often broaden my history in order to create sort of unified groups with people who I am meeting for the first time. For example, I'm from Cardiff, which is the capital city of South Wales, but if I meet somebody who's from a different part of South Wales, like say Swansea, then I might say, oh, would you look at that? We're both from South Wales. By broadening the category to South Wales, then suddenly it seems like we're from the same place. It creates this sort of common background and therefore establishes some rapport and some liking. So when you're trying to persuade someone, always try and get them to like you first because they're much more likely to say yes to you that way. But also when you meet somebody for the first time, to try and get them to like you, talk about things that you have in common. And if you don't really have any, then try broaden your horizons and see if you can fit multiple different things into the same category, because that might establish a similar kind of effect. Okay, and the 6th and final principle is scarcity. So scarcity is the idea that we're more likely to value something if we feel like we only have a limited amount of time or there's only a limited amount of them. We use the scarcity principle in marketing all the time, you know, when we say there's only 5 left or that you only got 30 days to do something. Now the crazy thing is that scarcity is so powerful psychologically that it can actually create entire sort of economic bubbles in of itself. You might argue that the whole reason why NFTs got to the super inflated price that they got to was because of scarcity, right? The idea that there was only one of these things drove up the price, drove up the demand in a completely false and artificial way for this digital product, which then ended up crashing when people realized that the scarcity didn't mean anything. I hope that makes sense. Those are the 6 principles of persuasion from Robert Cialdini's Influence. There are plenty more examples in the book that I didn't talk about in this video, so I highly recommend you read it if you haven't already. If you guys enjoyed today's video or you learned something, can you please give me a thumbs up down below because it really helps me out, and subscribe if you haven't already. We are rapidly approaching 10,000 subscribers and we have a big 10,000 subscriber special coming when we reach there. So please help me reach that milestone and I will see you in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye bye.